Hello, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's Suzi van Mensenkamp here on in12d. I'm hosting myself today. We might be joined later by Ramzi, but I'm very excited to start today's show with a previous guest on the podcast. We had Roland here at the beginning of last year. So we're going to really try to pick up where we left off on the last episode. We have titled this episode today Seeing Clearly, and really it's about, finding contentment through, uh, whether it's Buddhist practices or yoga, meditation practices, and really kind of finding our way into that feeling. So hopefully by the end of today's show, you'll be feeling some Santosha or contentment yourself. I'm excited and I'm grateful that Roland Steinle is here. He's based in Arizona. I'm based here in Ireland. We're old friends. We have very similar interests in relation to yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda. That's where we met. And without further ado, warm welcome to you, Roland. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me come back again. I point out, though, that after our first two teacher programs that we did together, I wasn't going to do yoga. And you told me that I was doing yoga, and you took me kicking and screaming through yoga teacher training. And after I finished, I ended up teaching a lot of yoga, probably more teaching yoga than I did meditation. So you're the reason I really got into the yoga world.
It's funny, isn't it, how we influence each other for sure. I think I remember that all right. But and similar to you, I did the yoga training purely for my own benefit. I never had any intention of teaching it. And like you, it was the first thing that I went to teach when I came back, because it's really where we kind of enter the field of these ancient Vedic sciences and practices, because yoga is familiar to everybody. Like, would you agree with that?
Yes. And I think that's the point we should start at, that what
Mm.
we call yoga in the United States and around the world now is actually the one of the 8 limbs of yoga. And the actual term for what we call yoga today is asana. The
Yeah.
term yoga is combining all 8 limbs. It's the joining, the yoking of all 8 limbs. But we tend to think of yoga only as of the branch of asanas, which was created to help people take a break from long periods of meditation.
Yeah, it's interesting kind of how yoga stuck, but I think even since we did our training back at the Chopra Center in, I guess it was about 2011, 2012, sometime then, yoga and meditation have become much more mainstream. Well, meditation for sure. I've seen a huge shift here in Ireland. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I've seen it too, and all of these ancient wisdoms. I saw yesterday on the Olympic coverage that the American snowboarders do qigong before every session.
Wow.
So the idea of using these practices to quiet the mind and get yourself ready for the day is something even the Olympic athletes are doing these days.
That's really cool. And that really promotes it amongst people like who are, who have these misconceptions. There's so many of them. Like, oh, if I couldn't do meditation because I'd have to be able to sit cross-legged, or, I'd have to wear sandals, or, I've heard all sorts of reasons and excuses why people think they couldn't meditate. But I really hope that over today's episode, we'll bust through a lot of those myths and really give people this what's really deeper, what really is meditation, like outside of just this word or idea or visual of somebody sitting on a rock with their eyes closed, and their thumbs and their forefinger joined together. What is it, like, layman's terms here?
I think that uh, I look at meditation of the vehicle that I use to create the space. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, said between the stimulus and the response is the space, and in that space is our freedom to choose our response. And how can
Mm.
we create space? I've found that using my meditation practice, if I meditate in the morning by 11 o'clock, I was a lawyer and a judge. But after I learned to meditate, I was a meditation judge. So I really found that certain mornings I was cheating on my meditation to do some work. And then at 11 o'clock, let me tell you, the lawyers were getting to me. So that really got me back into, I don't care what's going to happen, I'm going to meditate before I leave the house in the morning. Because I knew at
Wow.
11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, when people were starting to hit all of my pain body trigger points, the meditation had that prophylactic effect later in the day.
It's true because the day we might all start off like pretty good. You know, we've had a full night's sleep, we're rested, we go about our day. But then things start to get to us, you know, it could be the traffic, it could be somebody, a customer, a client, a boss, or something like that. It could be the kids are totally just not cooperating in the car, whatever. And that's when, like you said, things start to kind of happen inside internally. We start to, you know, what's happening to us? Our nervous system is getting hijacked by something that's going on, I guess.
Well, if you just look at the typical day in the typical family, you wake up in the morning and you realize that you turn the snooze on once too often. So now you're rushing to get ready. You want to get the kids out of the house to get them to childcare or to school. They're not cooperating. You get on the road and the traffic isn't cooperating. So you finally show up in the office at 8 o'clock in the morning and you've already been in 2 hours of perpetual stress. Stress being anything, any obstacle getting in the way of completing what you want to complete. And you
Mm,
haven't made one phone call, you haven't done one piece of work, and you've had 2 hours of stress, and then you spend 8 hours at your desk or wherever you work, and there isn't a time where you've had a chance to take a break and just breathe and just let the stress dissipate for some period of time. Then you get home, you have to do the dinner, you have to do the homework, and it's 9 o'clock at night. You've now been up for 15 hours, and your body has never come back to that state of equilibrium that we
mm.
should have.
So you're reckoning, and I know that like meditation really interrupts that sort of sequence of events by resetting your nervous system, I suppose, is an easy way to put it, you know. And so when do you like, I know when you were busy working as a judge and a lawyer, you know, you had a time you had to do it, like before your day kicked off. But what's it like for you now, Roland, in your regular day?
Well, I still, it depending upon, I do my meditation, I do my physical workout at the gym, and depending upon what class I'm taking, sometimes they get inverted. This morning, I did a 5 o'clock in the morning class, so when I got home at 6, I meditated.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so I kind of trade those off, but I want the first meditation in before I start anything in my day. And then the afternoon meditation is what I call my decompression chamber. 4 or 5 o'clock before I want to start my evening routine. I want to take that break. And a lot of times in the afternoon, I've been doing more guided meditations.
Yeah. Yeah, you
And
can mix it up. You can definitely mix that up. I agree with you there. And the timings too. Like it does help to be regular in your practice. But I also say like what our teacher used to say to us, WW, whatever works. It's better to have done something for even 5 minutes than to leave it all go for 5 days and try to do a long meditation in the weekend or something, you know?
well, there's no bad meditation except the one you miss.
Totally. Totally. And I think it's, you know, it kind of speaks volumes. The people around you would reckon they know when you've missed one. I don't know, does that happen where you live? But it does happen for me.
I heard the story, and I've been single most of my life, so I don't have kind of that. And my kids are a very young 50 and 46, so it's been a long time since they were young
Yeah.
kids. But one person said that he came home one day and he was griping and moaning, and his wife turned around and said, "Will you please go back and do your meditation? Because we can't handle you unless you go do your meditation." Which is a kind of a great example of it's that decompression chamber. We bring home with us
Mm,
all of the angst that we did at work. And who's there to get all of that backlash is your family. So
mm.
is the best version of you showing up at 5 o'clock in the evening? And if it's not, what's the best way to make sure that the best version of you shows up to be a family member in the evening? And I think it's meditation.
I
It
agree.
creates that it creates that pause, allows you to digest the all of the what we call the ama, the negative emotions. And then when you start interacting with your family, that's all in the past.
Yeah.
And as Byron Katie says, best part of the past, it's over.
There you go. Let's go back to the past. I'm ready. I really want to go deep in this chat, because I know you've been studying for years and years. You've been writing about this. You're very, very well informed. Um, let's go back to the Yoga Sutras, to where it begins, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. We were talking about this before we went live. Um,
Yep.
that second sutra, like that,
Yep.
this, like, how far back does this go?
Well, Patanjali, I think, was early, like 500 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Patanjali sat down and he reorganized what he considered all the thought on meditation, and then wrote the Yoga Sutras. But in the first three sutras, he summed up meditation. The first sutra is let the practice begin. The
Mm-hmm.
second sutra is yoga or meditation, yoga being that yoking of all of these different branches, but meditation is the quieting or the calming of the fluctuations of the mind. We do know that we will have thoughts. We won't have
Mm.
thoughts when we die, but until we
Yeah.
die, we will have thoughts. So yoga is the quieting or the calming of the fluctuations of the mind. And then number three says, once you've done that, the seer, the self, abides in its own true nature, one way or the other. We move from the physical to the spiritual world. Once we can get to that point, we see ourselves as a spiritual being having a human experience when we can quiet the mind down. If you want to look at it a little differently, we are the sky, and
Mm.
all of our emotions, all of our thoughts, all of our patterns are the weather passing through the sky. So some days we're going to have the stormy, angry thunderstorm. Other days we're going to just have that gloomy sadness. But that's all weather, and it's all the weather's going to pass. This too will pass.
It's
So if
true.
we approach meditation from, we're not trying to stop all of our thoughts, we're looking to quiet them, we're looking to calm them. And in between the calming of the thoughts, the gentle repetition between having a thought and back to your focus of attention, whether it be a mantra or your breath, but this quiet back and forth really creates space for you. And if you can start creating the space for you, then you start seeing what your true nature is. And your true nature is, as I said before, we're our spiritual beings having a human experience. We chose to come here to have a human experience.
Yeah. And we can get so derailed by kind of ideas of who we are, who we should be, who we could be, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And really, when we get quiet and we do find that kind of stillness, it sort of connects us with, like, that spiritual nature, like a deeper part of who we really are. Like
Yeah.
when you meditate, Roland, like, and we talk about connecting with your true nature, what have you discovered about yourself through your practice that maybe you hadn't experienced when you were mad busy as a judge and a lawyer?
Well, the nice part of being a judge is they made me wear a robe, a costume. And
Yeah.
I realized, the more I started into the meditation world, that being a judge was a role that I played. And we're all, as I put it, we're all playing a role in a Shakespearean play. But
Yeah.
we are actors in lots of different plays. Some day I'm the comic fool, other days I'm the tragic hero. Some days I'm the knight in shining armor. Some people love me, some people hate me. But on the end of the day, before I walked out of when I walked off of the bench, I went in, I took my robe off and said, I'm no longer Judge Roland, I'm just Roland, small j, small r. Because my
Mm.
true nature is I'm just me.
Mm.
I have my own special gifts, my own talents, special talents. And when you look at it from that point of view, you start to detach from the roles we play. And you understand that we're playing roles, but the true self, the seer, what I talked about before, doesn't have those. And quite frankly, the more I meditated, the more I got less attached to the robe. A lot of people talk about judges having robitis. Yeah.
Yeah.
The I know mind, takes over. But the more I meditated, the more I was able to create that space to understand. Yeah, you know, uh, when I first became a judge, I took a principle that I thought I did as a lawyer. Every lawyer should show up on time, be prepared, and follow the rules. So as a judge, I tended to be, that's what lawyers should do.
Yeah.
Then I learned that there's three dirty words: would, could, or should. And I realized that I could show up on time, I could be prepared, and I could follow the rules. But I attribute that directly to my meditation practice. The more I meditated, the less. So then I just looked at it from the point of view. We go back to the ancient Gita, chapter 2, verse 47. I'm entitled to my actions, but not the fruit of my actions. Perform action, whatever the result. You're
Mm.
not responsible for the karma that you do by performing your actions, but don't be tied into that. Don't grip tightly to the actions, to the fruit of your actions. But eventually I ended up leaving the bench and leaving the practice of law. A lot of lawyers work till they're 85. And, I've been
Wow.
retired since 2019, and I find lots of stuff to do every day. Most of it, I get to go back and do things that I really wanted to do beforehand. So,
So do you feel like that true nature, that part of you has other qualities that you may not have been expressing in your previous roles? Like, do you feel like there's a softening, or there's a little bit more compassion, perhaps, or more insight, or shift in perception or perspective in
yeah, well, I
hindsight
know
roles?
I'm absolutely sure that my perception has changed.
Mm-hmm.
And really over the last 2 years, one of our teachers, David G, tells his teachers that they should um, theme the month. And
Ah.
I had in December of 2023 decided I wanted to write more. And then he came up with the idea of theming the month, and that was the perfect thing. So I'd pick a theme for the month, and then I'd write about it 3 or 4 times, post it on my different groups on Facebook, and I really engaged a different part of me, the more intellectual part of me that loves to the curiosity of what is life all about.
Mm.
I didn't have time for that beforehand. I had cases to move, and even the legal world. How many cases did you close this month, Judge? You only closed 150. You should have closed 200. But
Yeah.
now I'm into a whole different thing, and I'm loving it. One
Good.
of my favorite poems is The Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost.
Mm.
And he talks about in one of the last stanzas how he'll save the other one for another day, but knowing how life works, things will come and he'll probably never come back and walk the other road. And I really feel I'm back walking a whole different road. It's a very spiritual. I'm really trying to embrace the spiritual side of my life and learn about with the curiosity of what's going on. And it's like peeling an onion, you
Mm.
know. From meditation, I got into the Ayurvedic lifestyle, then I got into yoga, and then
Mm.
later on I got into, Vedic astrology, and now I'm into studying on what intuition is. And there's all the ties back to the ancient documents that talk about meditation and the whole thing.
So it's really like what you're saying here is like this kind of moment in time really shifted your perspective on a lot of things, including who you are and your role you were playing. But it also kind of like took you, like in that Robert Frost poem, like it took you on the road less traveled. Like it really took you down a trajectory that probably wouldn't be the regular route that a judge would take, when he comes to retirement or something, if they even chose to give it up at that stage. Like, it's really interesting, isn't it? You went on such a different path.
Well, I've learned, and Ram Dass talks about it in one of his books, but we have the body of knowledge, the rational brain, but the problem with the rational brain and the mind, as remember the layers of life,
Yeah.
at the smallest part of the layers of life is this thing called ego. And ego is fear-based. And ego doesn't want to explore new and other things.
Yeah.
But he talks about a separate body of knowledge. It's called intuition. And we talk about intuition as I got a bad intuition, but I found that intuition isn't good or bad. If it's bad intuition, that's fear and that's the mind. But intuition's safe, it's kind, it's compassionate, and it's always surprising. And but we have to get out of our rational mind in order to get into that. And how do we get out of the rational mind? Meditation.
That's it.
Yeah, my life coach teacher, Alan Cohen, says all healing is a releasing of fear. Marie, my intuition teacher, says that in order to get into that high vibration where you tap into your intuition, you have to get out of fear. And what do we try to do through meditation? We want to get to that fourth state of consciousness, that present moment awareness. And the key feature of a present moment awareness is an absence of fear.
That's it.
So
yeah.
I just kind of look at it that if someone's telling me, if I get a thought that something fearful is going to happen, I know that it's the ego and the mind. Then I try to figure out, find some space and try to, what's my intuition telling me?
Yeah, I've been studying, as you know, from when we meet on a Monday, dream yoga. And I know I keep mentioning it on every podcast I do because it's been such a phenomenal kind of journey for me to discover it. And like some of the part of the dream yoga practice is, working on certain centers. But ultimately what it is all leading to, from peace to clarity to stability, but it's leading us to a place of fearlessness. So it's not that we're become suddenly like, much more courageous or anything. It's really showing us how to find the part of us that can stay stable in the face of fear. And then fear is absorbed by it. You know what I mean? It dissolves at that point. So it's a really beautiful practice. And what I loved when I discovered it is that, we do sleep for 7 or 8 hours, hopefully, a night. And that's the practice. So in a lifetime, you could have 25 or 30 years of practice where you would have been just dead asleep, So it's almost like effortless. It's a bit like meditating on your breath and just sitting and giving yourself the time and space while you're awake. But with the dream yoga practice, it's like you just set these very subtle intentions, you move your awareness around these locations, you go to sleep, but it's how you wake up because your rational mind naturally goes to sleep. It's programmed to switch off while we're resting. But the intuition, or the left brain, let's say, or the other side of the brain, is waiting for whatever instruction we give it. Now it can go off on whatever tangent it can depending on what dreams and stuff that it's processing. But with real clear direction, it becomes this whole other sort of like, it opens up all those hours. Because that was something I wanted to ask you about when we were training as meditation teachers. We talked about higher states of consciousness. Like you said there, we talked about the fourth state, where you can start to connect with that restful awareness, with awareness, witnessing. And then there are the higher states. Like I was always kind of striving, I think, in my practice to experience the higher states. And I always sort of cast aside the, waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep. I just thought, oh yeah, everybody just has to do that. But I don't know about
Well,
you, Roland. Have you dreamed? Have you any insights into that as a
well,
practice?
I would only point out that you've reached a critical thing, because if you look at an Om symbol,
Yeah,
the bottom part of the Om symbol underneath the squiggly line are the deep sleep, or the deep sleep, where then you have the dream state, then you have the awake state, then the
yeah,
squiggly line, and then the fourth state of consciousness is above it.
yeah.
So the ancients understood that there's an important part of your awareness that comes from your dreams. And when you start looking at, if you take it to an extreme, can you really tell the difference today? If are we awake here? Or are we dreaming that we're having this podcast?
Precisely.
Where's the line between the two of them? And
Yeah.
where do we get the term Om? It's Akara, Ukara, and Makara, the three states that you talked about. And if you
Mm,
put AUM together, it comes to Om. But in English, we've taken the diphthong AU and made it an O for Om, but it's actually AUM. And if you go back and you look at that diagram, it's probably 6,000 years old. The
yeah.
ancients understood that. So,
Precisely. I've just finished teaching in eight sessions, and I think we were looking at that about session 5, like where we looked at the Om symbol, and then that point, like the dot above, which is the point beyond the Turiya. You know, the Turiya is like it's a state that can be reached even while you're asleep. That awareness that we are talking about or exploring and through meditation also occurs during dreams and sleep, and dreamless sleep. That level of awareness is awakened, and like it's not like it was ever switched off. We've just been so wired and disconnected from it. So it's kind of like rewiring ourselves, putting ourselves back together, including the dream yoga.
well, that's when we talked about me coming back. I said I wanted to come back to the basics. And when we really come back to the basics, that we shouldn't be striving to get to the fifth or sixth level. Do I
Yeah,
really want to be Michelangelo painting for days at a time, the Sistine Chapel? I respect the fact that he could get into that higher state of consciousness,
yeah,
but I kind of look at it that I'm just me, and if I could find some stillness, and I can find that that place where there is no fear, life is good.
it's
You
true.
know, Byron Katie says that you can argue with reality all you want, and you'll only be wrong 100% of the time. And what does that tell you? That we spend most of our time either worrying about what's going to happen in the future, anxiety, or moaning and groaning about all of the times we were the victim in the past.
True.
And we don't spend any time in the present moment. Like,
Yeah.
how wonderful is this? I'm on a podcast with you, and in this moment, I'm not worrying about paying my bills. I'm not worrying about what's going to happen later today. I'm just enjoying myself having a great discussion with a longtime friend.
Exactly. Like this is truly living in the moment, and it's beautiful, like because it's a like-minded, it's a subject that we're both very passionate about. I know that. And like we want to share it. I think that's why we're having the conversation live on YouTube, because we want to really share this, because I know from my point of view, when I started to learn this and I saw the impact and the shift it made in my own life, I wanted to sing it from the rooftops. I was like, why doesn't everybody get to do this? From a very young age. This should be part of this is how we're wired. So I don't know. Are you a bit of an evangelist in your own
Well,
world?
in a sense, yes. As I said, I became known. I started teaching yoga in the county health facility that I worked in.
Mm-hmm.
So I quickly became known as the yoga judge. And there's a funny story on that. I was in juvenile court and I needed, we had a lawyer for the mother, the father, the attorney general had a lawyer, and then there was a guardian litem that looked after the best interest of the kids. So before I could do any hearing, I needed 4 people to be at one place at one time with each of their busy calendars, plus
Wow.
my own busy calendar. So one day we waited and waited for one lawyer to get started, and she came in the back door, ran across. She was obviously all in a state of anxiety. And I just said, stop, please just stop right here. And she looked at me and I said, would you please take 3 breaths, deep breaths? And then I said to her, if the universe intended you to be here any sooner, you would have arrived sooner. You arrived at exactly the right moment. So please go have a seat and we'll get started. Everybody else in the room was like rolling their eyes. Oh, the yoga judge is off to his.
But I'm sure she was so grateful that you were a compassionate, kind judge waiting there. You know what I mean? You could have struck the whole thing out or something.
Well, I could have reacted and lectured her on what she should have done, what I would have done, and how she could have made it even better. But I stopped lecturing people.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
you really get into the idea that the universe will unfold, and how
It's
are we
true.
going to react to it? And when I do my coaching, my biggest thing that I want to work with people on is what version of you is going to show up.
Yes,
And if you want the best version of you to show up, you have to come from that point of stillness.
you do.
Look back at the Tao Te Ching, chapter 15. Do you have the patience until the muddy water settles? Can you wait unmoving until the right action arises on its own?
Mm,
And that's meditation. That's the whole definition of meditation is to be able to find that pause in your life, practicing the pause, I call it. And while I
yeah.
meditate twice a day, I have other pattern interrupts. You have the 16 seconds to bliss. If you're having a moment, you can go take a walk up the stairs in your office building and breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, and do 4 rotations. And you've only taken like 3 minutes. But these little things, these pauses we can do throughout the day are all meditative. They're all ways for you to find that space between the stimulus and the response. It's amazing that, if you go back and read about Viktor Frankl, he
Yeah.
said his freedom is how was he going to respond to the guards?
Wow.
And in the book of Joy, which is the conversations between Archbishop
Oh,
Desmond
Desmond.
Tutu and the Dalai Lama got out of Tibet one step ahead of the communists, but one of his main monks got trapped behind and spent 10 years in a communist prison. And the
Mm,
Dalai Lama looked at him and he says, was it bad? And he said, well, one day it got really bad because I thought I was losing compassion for my guards.
wow. There you go. Like, say no more. Like, I guess that's really kind of a tell-all, isn't it? Like where it can take you, like that you can find that deep, deep compassion for your captors, for the guards that are locked you up for 10 years. It's a I suppose speaking of bliss, because you started off with saying about follow your bliss earlier on, like being the theme for the year. So you came up with that obviously, and we're only kind of into the second month anyway. But when you have your theme for the year, Roland, and it's in this case follow your bliss, and I know you're writing about it and you're kind of reading different books and you're kind of exploring, I suppose, what is bliss and how does it sort of outside of the kind of intellectual kind of journey with it, like do you feel more blissful when you have a theme, follow your bliss, or do you
Well,
feel like I should be more blissful? What's that like?
well, I think part of the problem is some of the terms that people used. Like when I say follow your bliss, it's been misunderstood. But if you read the whole Joseph Campbell quote.
Yes.
It's basically saying, find what makes you happy and joyful.
Okay.
And when you find what makes you happy and joyful, then you're going to find people who are helping you with this being joyful and happy. And then all the doors open up. Blissful isn't sitting in a corner on a meditation cushion uh, chanting Om
Yeah.
and try to get in some higher state of consciousness. Bliss is literally figuring out what makes you vibrate really, really high. You
Yeah.
know, and the same thing with contentment. We have this term of contentment, which means you just accept my sad reality. But contentment, actually defined in the yoga, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he defines it as contentment brings unsurpassed joy. So when you use the English term contentment, you get this very milquetoast type thing.
Mm.
But if you read what Patanjali was saying, that contentment will bring you unsurpassed joy, then you can see Joseph Campbell's probably right, because he says instead of contentment, he says follow your bliss.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is what brings you unsurpassed joy. And
Yeah.
so a lot of these people are saying the same things. However, we tend to use English terms that tend to be a little bit. So you have to have that curiosity to dive deep. What did he mean by follow your bliss? You might have to
Mm.
read some different things. You have to go back and you have to read, people who have commented on the Yoga Sutras
Mm.
and see what their take is. And you go back and you read the Gita. The Gita is wonderful when you start looking at it one way or the other. And even back when the Gita was written in chapter 10, verse 10, he talks about intuition. He says you
Yeah.
have your rational analysis and then you have your divine wisdom, which he's even in the Gita, Krishna is breaking down between your limited rational brain and your intuition. And one of the things we learned in meditation teacher training is when we get into the gap, we tap into this universal field of energy and intelligence. So
Yeah.
for me, intuition is where I tap into this universal field of intelligence and energy, and answers that I didn't think are possible
Mm.
become real. They become real. This whole
Yeah.
concept of manifesting comes into if you vibrate and you set an intention and give it some attention, it will manifest.
It's true. Like I think that's where people kind of give up too soon when they start meditation. It's like, "Oh, well, I'm not able to do it because I can't stop thinking, so I must be terrible at it." And they kind of give up before they really even get started. That's why I really believe that everybody needs a good teacher to really kind of walk the start of that path with them, because all sorts of stuff starts to happen when you start to meditate. And just because you're sitting there with your fingers like this, or you're doing whatever practice you're doing, it doesn't necessarily stop thought. It's not a thought repellent, like. So maybe we
It's
could break into that a little bit so that anybody listening can.
Well, let's start with everybody thinks that meditation, you have to sit in a lotus position with your back straight. If you don't have your back straight, some mean Buddhist monk is going to swat you with a bamboo stick. Um, and again,
Not happening.
when you go back to Patanjali, the only thing he says about it, he says the postures of meditation should embody steadiness and ease.
There you go.
David G says it's called feathering your nest. Comfort is queen. Why? Because if you're comfortable taking a break out of your life and spending 20 minutes or 30 minutes just being, you're going to come back the next day. If you sit on a cushion and you're not comfortable, you're not going to come back the next day.
It's true.
And the other thing about this whole thing is when I go to the gym and I really don't want to work out, but I go in and have a good workout, and I take a moment and just say, how good do I feel now that I've gotten to the gym and I've done my workout? The next day, it's easier to come back and do the workout because I know what I'm going to feel like afterwards. So after meditations, I always take a few moments just to do a quick body scan. How am I feeling?
Yeah.
And if the idea is I'm feeling relaxed, I'm feeling good, that I've been able to push aside some of the million thoughts coming through my head,
Mm,
then it's easier to come back the next day.
exactly.
It you know the in the Gita, and this is both yoga and in meditation. One of my big yoga teachers, who I really liked, always started the practice off by saying, it's better to do your dharma imperfectly rather than to try to do someone else's dharma perfectly. And
Mm,
literally twice in the Gita, they come back to the same concept. The second time in chapter 18 says it's better to do your dharma, your prescribed routine, imperfectly rather than try to do someone else's
yeah,
perfectly. And it says you will not develop any bad karma because you haven't done it perfectly.
there you go.
So
Yeah, be yourself.
when we do this practice, idea is I'm going to take a break and I'm just going to go from doing to being for a period of time, and I'll see whatever happens.
Yeah, it's not trying to have any particular experience. You're not trying to, you know, levitate or, transcend. It's just it's a short pause. That's how I see it now. Just pause and
Yeah.
then get in the habit of it and then let that deepen naturally of its own accord, for sure. And thoughts come and they're part of the practice. They come and
Yep.
go, but it's not getting hijacked by them or, sort of, you can go off down a rabbit hole, what you call it, like a rabbit hole, I suppose. I've done that. I could be sitting in meditation looking the part, but then I start to sort of think about something in great detail. And I think oh, this is so important. I've got to be thinking about this thing right now. But then the other part of me who's practiced at meditation says, hey, I thought you were meditating, and I'm like, oh yes, okay. The thoughts will come back afterwards, and then I just go back to, well, whatever I'm practicing, breath or mantra or body scan or whatever I'm doing.
The other interesting part of this teacher that talked about doing your practice imperfectly, she always also started off by saying, let's take all of our thoughts, all of our worries, all of our anxieties, all of our daily responsibilities, and let's put them on the shelf for a short period of time. And when we finish class, you can take them up or perhaps not, which was
Yeah,
always the key line that I always loved was, we can put everything on the shelf. And when I have thoughts in meditation, I just go, thank you very much for reminding me I got to pay my bill, but can we talk about it in 15 minutes after we finish the meditation?
yeah,
And then I go back to my mantra, which I use as my focus of attention. And um, when the thought comes in, one of the things when I was working as a judge, I lived in a house and my meditation was 7 to 7:30, and then I head for work.
yeah,
But at 7:15, the school bus would come down the street. The diesel engine, I could hear it come. The brakes would squeak, uh, and then the kids would get on the bus, and the bus would go along. And I after for a while it annoyed me, but after a while I go, oh, the bus is here today to pick up the kids. How wonderful! The bus would leave, and I just gently float back into the meditation. Interruptions are going to happen. You're
yeah,
going, yeah,
totally.
and if you just welcome them
Mm,
and then let them pass, you know, this too will pass,
it's
and then
true.
come back. So if we come back to the whole idea that there's no perfect way to meditate, there's no perfect way to sit, there's no perfect result from any given meditation.
Yep.
You know, we learned in training that there are 4 ways you can tell that you had a legitimate meditation. You were repeating the mantra, you were having thoughts, you had some moments where you went into the gap, and you may have fell asleep. Any one of those 4 was a valid meditation.
That was a revelation for me. I remember just going, oh, and that's when the lesson about like don't try too hard, don't concentrate too hard, because I think the kind of perception is, oh, I better try really hard now to, stop this thinking mind of mine. But really it's much more about softening and surrendering and just be like allowing awareness to become aware. And then, like you said, you might drift off, you know, you might go somewhere and not even know you've been there till you come back and go, wow, what was that? Which is that gap that you're talking about. Let's expand a tiny bit about the gap a little bit, just to give people, like, for me, the gap really, I don't know, it's like dipping your toe into something that's absolutely refreshing. You know what I mean? Because you don't know you're in it till you come back out. So, how
Well,
would you explain that in your own experience, Roland?
well, I like and this has really worked for me. When I get into the gap, you come back with just a little piece of restful awareness, a little piece of calmness, little piece of that eternal, if you want to use the term bliss, but we're just talking a thimbleful.
Yep.
But over 6 months, that thimbleful becomes a potful.
Hmm.
And so again, the more you meditate on any individual session, you may just get a little glimpse of the other side, but over a period of time, that becomes your routine,
Yeah.
and you appreciate that, there's no spatial definition of how long you're in the gap, because if you say I was in the gap for 20 minutes, you weren't in the gap, because it transcends space and time.
Yes.
So if you look at it as if you spend 30 minutes of meditation and you just get just a little taste of that
Mm.
stillness on the other side, that peace, that calmness, that wonderful warmth of compassion and love. Um, 6 months later, you're exhibiting the best version of you has definitely changed.
That's true. Absolutely.
How you're showing up has definitely changed. Someone comes up to you and says, you're really a jerk. Yeah, I can handle that. I've been a jerk a whole bunch of times in my life. So thank you for letting me know that I was a jerk. I don't think I was a jerk right now, but I'll accept the fact that you thought I was a jerk.
Yeah.
Obviously, you just need a big hug.
Yeah, you're not feeling like punching the guy or reacting, or yeah. I think compassion is ultimately one of the key qualities that is cultivated. And like, let's go into the other quality we were talking about at the beginning, the Santosha from the Yoga Sutras, which is really the compassion, or no, the contentment, let's say. Contentment.
Well,
Um, Go ahead.
contentment to me is when we're purely in the moment and the moment's complete.
When we're purely in the moment and the moment is complete.
I've translated it into conscious living is living without longing or resistance.
Oh, I like living without resistance. Yes.
Consciously living without resistance or longing.
Yes. Hmm. That really resonates with me, living without resistance, because whenever I was like going through kind of big parts of my own, let's call it transformation or journey or whatever, I would really hit like the edge of my reason. My resistance would be there, keeping me safe, like sort of, holding me in a place of, whatever the comfort zone was of my own making. But I'd have to sort of let go of that resistance and kind of just stay present there. And then it would sort of dissolve and I could take the next step. So resistance was
There's
always a sign for me.
the other concept is a real important concept, especially in the Buddhist tradition. Again, if you talk to Buddha would say, I wasn't trying to create a religion.
Yeah.
I found a way of life that works for me. And if you try it on, if you like it, fine. If you don't like it,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. But he did not find enlightenment until he started walking the middle path.
Mm,
He lived in the palace, he didn't find it. He lived that very austere lifestyle where he meditated and fasted, and he didn't find enlightenment. He finally found enlightenment when he sat under the Bodhi tree and just walked the middle path.
yeah.
And the other part of it is, after he found enlightenment, Mara, who was the demon that tormented him so much before he found enlightenment, would show up when he would be giving a talk in the forest. He went from town to town and out in the forest would give a Dharma talk.
Yeah.
And Mara would show up, and his number one guy would come to him and says, Buddha, there's Mara in the background. And Buddha would say, well, invite him in for tea as soon as we finish. I want him to come in. We could sit down and we could talk about this thing. And so Thich Nhat Hanh came up with this concept of inviting Mara in that I liked and I modified. And so in like 2005, I always thought Friday night you had to go out with your friends and because it's Friday, go to happy hour. And it just
Hmm.
wasn't sitting with me anymore. But there was always, what do they call it? FOMO, fear of missing out. So I'd go home and I would brew up a pot of tea with my fancy little Japanese teapot, and I'd put
Yeah.
it on the coffee table, and I'd have two cups, and I'd pour a cup for Mara and I pour a cup for me, and then I'd play the devil's advocate and I'd do what Mara was saying: "You're a loser. You're home here alone." Da 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 da. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, Mara didn't show up.
Oh, interesting. Tea with Mara.
So whatever you're trying to resist, invite in,
Mm.
set a tea setting, and do a little self study and try to trace back, where does this come from.
Let's explore. Let's for somebody who doesn't know what Mara represents. Can you just give that a little bit more context there?
Well, Mara is the same thing as, remember, Jesus got tempted in the desert by the devil, Satan.
Hmm.
Mara was the Indian version of Satan and absolutely tormented Buddha as he was trying to find enlightenment. Here's 1,000 women, you can have them all. You can have all the gold in the world, you can have it all. He would
Mm.
tempt him with all these things, and Mara kept resisting the temptation, and eventually he found enlightenment. But Buddha did not have to stay on earth. He could have transcended to the heavens, having attained enlightenment, but chose to stay to tell people how they could live a life of enlightenment. But
Yeah.
even after he found enlightenment, Mara, this tempting our
Yeah.
dark side, I think that some people call it the what is it? The tyrant,
Petty tyrants or
the
the
petty.
no.
Yeah, it's the petty tyrant in your life. So
Yeah, yeah.
Mara, the
So
petty tyrant, will always come back and taunt you. But the whole idea is if you name it, invite it in for tea, and analyze, why is this such a big thing? Eventually, Friday nights became my decompression day. I'd go
nice,
home, I'd cook a nice dinner, I'd watch a stupid movie that would make me laugh, and it'd be this wonderful thing. And now, uh, most of the time on Saturday nights, I take my best friend out to dinner, me.
nice,
I can
nice.
go and have a nice dinner, but I say I'm taking my best friend out to dinner because Mara doesn't want to show up anymore, so I might as well take me out to dinner. And so, but again, when we're talking about meditation, remember that Thich Nhat Hanh literally created the walking path in Plum Village in France.
Yes.
For him, a meditative practice was to walk the walking path. And there's a lot of different ways you can create your own meditative practice. I was a swimmer in high school. What better way to find where you can just quiet all the noise outside of you than to hop in a swimming pool and swim laps and watch how you're stroking and how are you kicking and try to quiet your mind. So there are, even if you're not going to sit and do a meditation practice,
True.
that doesn't mean you can't find something in your life that is meditative. And that goes back to what we call mindfulness.
Yeah, living more mindfully without judgment is the key point there, I think. Because we can be so harsh. Like the judgments that like, oh, my bum looks big in this, or oh, like I'm too slow, or that's too fast. Like it's just all these comparisons, and it's
Well, when you compare, you despair.
yeah, there you go. When you compare, you despair.
And when you compare, you're not in the present moment.
Yeah, you get really it's such a dull sort of state to get caught up in, like, so that's what I love about kind of a regular kind of practices of mindfulness, whether it's could be washing your hands, it could be just taking a pause every hour, and have a little bell go off on your phone, just to kind of bring you back from wherever you are. Like it's interrupting again the pattern of rumination and
Well,
comparison, I suppose.
the root for rumination is how a cow chews grass. It chews and chews and chews. That is the root for the English term rumination.
Mm,
So, but again, when we're ruminating, it's either out of resisting what's happening or longing for something different to happen.
yeah, longing for something to be different than how it is. Whereas, I don't know, when you use your monthly themes, Roland, like what did you say your theme is for this month is right view, yeah?
Right view.
Yeah.
And
How is
actually,
that showing up for you this month?
well, what was interesting when I started doing a little research into right view, reading Thich Nhat Hanh wrote about the Eightfold Path in one of his books, and then there's some other books on it. Actually, the right view is paradoxical because what you find out is the right view is to have no view.
Mm,
In other words, we end up with all these core views of what should happen and what, we grow up, and as Don Miguel Ruiz says, we become domesticated. So if we want to have the right view, we have to go back and we have to analyze each one of these notions and see whether or not it has any truth in today's life.
yeah.
Uh, do I really have to wear a sport coat and tie to go out to dinner? Well, if I ask my sister from Boston, absolutely. No proper person would not go out to dinner without a coat and tie on. And but here I live in Phoenix. I go out with shorts and flip flops and a polo shirt. But that's kind of a funny example. But we hold all of these beliefs, and the older we get, the more entrenched we become in, and we start moaning that this isn't what it was like in the 50s, this isn't what it was like in the 60s, and we really need to go back to these times one way or the other. Well, we need an intellectual curiosity of examining. One of the niyamas is self-study.
Yeah.
And what we need to do is practice a little self-study and see whether or not that has any truth in my present life. And where do we get to do this is when we slow down a little bit and take a deep breath and say, hold it here. Do I really want to do this? Why am I having this thought? And then you get in with, you probably have a whole nother discussion of the interconnection between the niyamas, which are practices, and the yamas, which are our moral code. And then you add in the kleshas, the five poisons, and you can see the total interrelationship between this whole concept of having the right view means going back and analyzing these. And if it's not the right view, you have to create a discipline, a tapas, to come up with how you now want to live your life. And when you do that, you're trying to come to that state of contentment that we talked about.
Yeah.
And eventually you have to surrender to the divine.
You really do have to surrender in the end. Like, do you think that the contentment comes kind of through the self study? Like, do you feel like you kind of come to the end of, not that you ever come to the full end, I guess, of it, but does it lead you into the Santosha?
Well, yeah, because I'm able to say one of my big things in my whole life was I grew up under a father who wore his watch 10 minutes fast and picked me up 20 minutes late.
Oh my God.
So if I'm not 10 minutes ahead of time, I'm late. So this whole concept of being on time is a concept that I grew up on. Now,
Yeah.
if I want to go back, I've done the self-study. It all comes from my father making me sit on a corner in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at 20 below zero for 20 minutes, waiting for him to pick me up because we had to live 3 miles outside of town rather than in town. Um, but when I started to do it, I started to laugh and start really playing with the idea that there is no such thing as being late.
Yeah.
I will arrive when I arrive at exactly the right moment that the universe wanted me to arrive at. And if
That's
I'm
true.
caught at a stop sign, well, maybe I can do 16 seconds to bliss for 2 minutes during this rotation of the lights.
Mm,
And then you start to realize when you got there, the professor was 5 minutes late, or you had reservations for five and you got there and you had to wait for 10 minutes before they'd seat you. So why did I need to even stress about being on time? Because more than likely the universe unfolded as it did. I just had my own concept that it should have done this. I should have been there. I should have been immediately seated. And
yeah, yeah,
and that's not reality. How do I know it's raining outside? I look outside, I see it's raining outside.
yeah,
I might not
yeah.
like it, but then I just need to learn to, as the old saying goes, learn to dance in the rain.
I feel like we could go on for at least another hour. I think it means that we'll have to get you back. We're gonna wrap it up today. I've really loved our chat, and maybe we'll come back and we look at those yamas and niyamas and the kleshas and just like I love bringing this yoga philosophy into real life. Into lived kind of experiences.
Well, when we took our training, we learned to memorize the Sanskrit word, the English word, and what it meant. But the one shortfall, in my view, was it didn't tell us how to incorporate it into and my little example of me with time when I did the self-study and then I created a new thought and a new discipline that
Hmm.
led me to contentment, that we have the clash, there's an interrelationship to all of this,
Yeah,
and I think that the more intellectually curious you are, and if you can pick a theme, and the wonderful thing about picking a theme is you don't have to live that theme all 7 days a week, 12 months a year. You just have to be curious, look at what it is, and then that's how I really spent a lot of time in 2025 in the whole concept of intuition.
yeah.
But after studying it, I started to incorporate how do I get more intuition in my life, and you start to change it. But again, unless I was willing to create the space in my life to do the study, I could be watching YouTube videos or I could be on scrolling on. I mean,
That's
that's the
true.
biggest thing in my whole life is the other day I had to avoid six people who are looking at their phone as they're walking in the gymnasium as I'm trying to walk out.
Wow.
Forget
Wow.
about the whole concept to put your phone in the locker and
In the
go just do
locker.
your exercise. Like we can't, we're in a society. There's a Kenny Chesney song called Noise, and I actually use it in my meditation training because the basic thing is we're just bombarded with noise.
Oh my God, we so are. We so are. You know what? This is full circle, Roland, because, we started this podcast with you sharing that I was really convincing you to do the yoga training. And come on, like, look how far we've both come. We're sitting here talking about the Yoga Sutras. We're talking about the origins of yoga and meditation. And it's kind of just, it's our, it's what keeps us going. It's amazing.
Well, I did eventually become a gong master and use hatha gong yoga teaching techniques. So you did lead me on a path that ended up going way beyond anything I ever thought of.
Well, I'm definitely way beyond any resistance that I had that first day. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, meet that point of resistance and then let it dissolve and then take the next step and look where we are. This is where it leads. It's quite profound, I have to say.
My favorite mantra these days is Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to that which I consider divine and say, Thy will be done.
Mm. I think we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Stay where you are. End
Have
the
a
stream.
wonderful day.
Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners to this podcast. We'll be back again next week.